أتكلم العربية لأن الإخوة كلهم يا إما أجانب يا إما ما بيتكلموا مليح باللغة العربية. ف
ممكن نحاول.
لا بس خليك على لغة واحدة لو سمحت.
of course.
خليك على كل حال. الإخوان اللي ما بيتكلموش الإنجليزي في ترجمة على اليمين بالزوم فيه ايكون بالنسبه للترانسليشن، ففي ترجمه بالانجليزي والعربي. we have also a translation from Arabic to English. اغلب الكلام سيكون بالانجليزي على ما اظن، وللاسف لان اللغه الانجليزيه كما تعرفوا هي لغه التامين، فبالتالي صعب علينا انه نطلب من الناس انهم يتكلموا بلغتنا اللي هي مش لغتهم، وسنحاول قدر الامكان ان نتكلم بالعربيه على الاقل انا بالنسبه لي. في اخ بيسالني هل في شهاده حضور؟ لا، ما في شهاده حضور لان هذا يسوي فري ويبينار. we don't deliver any certificate. هذا حضور للناس اللي بس بدها تتعلم وتتثقف الى اخره. شهاده الحضور تعطى لدبلومات معينه الى اخره. I think we can start now. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think we can start now. It's 1 o'clock. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. مساء الخير. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to open this GAIF 9th webinar. First of all, I would like to thank our speakers, Dr. Simon Young, Mr. Amoury Duftel, Mr. Khalid Noueri, Mr. Najm Al-Hala, Mr. Shams Kassali. Thank you also to our technical and communication team and the partner Marcade. In this webinar, if this webinar was organized, it's an initiative of Shams Kassali, my friend Shams Kassali, and with the support of Willis Tower Watson. Thank you also to my GAIF colleagues who are working hard to make our event successful. Just few opening remarks to our speakers. I will ask them to stick to one language and to the allocated time. In my case, as a courtesy to my speakers, I spoke in English till now, but allow me now to speak in Arabic. سيداتي سادتي زملائنا الأعزاء في ربوع الوطن العربي وفي كل بلاد العالم، لا يخفى عليكم أن موضوع الكوارث الطبيعية هو موضوع الساعة بامتياز، نظرا لكل الكوارث التي تحل بالعالم سنة بعد سنة والتي ازدادت حدتها ووتيرتها. في سنة 2020 بلغت الخسائر الناجمة عن الكوارث 83 مليار دولار. في النصف الأول من سنة 21 بلغت الخسائر 77 مليار دولار، وكانت أقل من سنة 2020. لكن ما تجدر الإشارة إليه هو أن التغيير المناخي سيتسبب في خسائر مستقبلية وسترتفع مع أقساط تأمين الممتلكات، ويتوقع لهذه الأقساط الناجمة عن التغيير المناخي أن تبلغ 183 مليار دولار في عام 2040 حسب تقرير صدر عن أيون. خلال النصف الأول من سنة 2021 بلغت قيمة الأخطار التي تعرضت للكوارث والمؤمن عليها 107 مليار دولار، في الوقت الذي كان معدل الكوارث على مدى 10 سنوات 96 مليار دولار. لكن هذا كان بسبب عاصفة هوريكان أيدا في أمريكا الشمالية والفيضانات في ألمانيا. في الدول العربية مجموعة متلاحقة من الكوارث والفيضانات في سوريا والمغرب والجزائر وعمان واليمن والعراق، وحرائق الغابات في الجزائر في شهر أغسطس الماضي، وحرائق أقل في لبنان والمغرب، والعاصفة المدارية شاهين في عمان في شهر أكتوبر الماضي. الجفاف في تونس والجزائر خلال سنة 2021، وحسب سويسري يتجلى تأثير المناخ في الحرارة المرتفعة وارتفاع مستوى المحيطات والفيضانات والظروف المناخية الصعبة، وبالخصوص الجفاف. بالإضافة إلى المشاكل التي يتسبب فيها التغير المناخي، تجدر الإشارة إلى أن الفجوة التأمينية كبيرة على المستوى العالمي، إذ تقدر أيون أنه من أصل 298 مليار دولار خسائر اقتصادية 97 مليار دولار فقط هي المؤمن عليها، وهذا يعني أن 64% من الخسائر غير مغطاة
are insured, which means that there are some damages that are not covered by insurance. That's why we have the webinar today to bridge the gap, the insurance gap. The main question is how can we bridge the insurance gap? There is no one answer for this question, but it's very important to prepare ourselves by studying the disasters and prepare modeling for that. So the target, the objective of this modeling first is to know the catastrophic damages and draw a map for them. Second, to have preemptive actions and prepare ourselves to face these disasters. Third, to estimate the losses so that we can cover them by insurance. That's why we have introduced this webinar with a group of experts. First, we have here Simon Young, the scholar. If I'd like to talk about Simon Young, I need 5 or 10 minutes to give an introduction about him. But I'd like to say he's a great expert and scholar in volcanoes and climate affairs. He's an expert based in Washington and working now with Watson after working with different institutions as ARC in Africa and others. Mr. Aburida, he's French, is from France, and he is working in AXA Climate, and he is a blogger and a specialist in the climate change disaster. Also, we have my friend Khaled Noueri, and he's graduated from Morocco, and he worked in Tunisia, Bahrain, and now he is the operation manager in Oman. Najm Al-Halia, he is a professor of actuarial science, and he's graduated from Montreal University, and he worked with the central, the SAR Morocco, and now he is the Director General of CAT, Company de Transport in Morocco, and they are responsible for covering the disasters in Morocco. Mr. Najm is a dear friend, and now he is working on this program. He has a vast experience in natural disasters for more than 10 years. Shams Kasali, the friend and the brother, has worked in London for 10 years, maybe more, with UAB, and in the treaties before moving to Watson as a regional director for the Middle East and North Africa, and he's responsible for Dubai branch BFC. Once more, we'd like to thank Willis Tower and Watson, and I'd like to thank all the panelists and the speakers today. And now I'll give the floor to Professor Dr. Simon Young. Simon, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much.
أشكرك شكرا جزيلا. سايمون، لديك 20 دقيقة لتقديم العرض.
So thank you very much for the introduction.
شكرا جزيلا على المقدمة، وإنه من دواعي سروري أن أكون معكم اليوم. أسعدتم صباحا.
So I'm going to introduce the subject of natural catastrophe modeling.
موضوع نموذج الخاص بالكوارث، وهو متعلق بما نطلق عليه فجوة الحماية.
So first, what is the protection gap? This is what we call the gap between economic losses from natural disasters
الخسائر الاقتصادية بسبب الكوارث الطبيعية والخسائر التي يتم تغطيتها بالتأمين.
In the graphic here,
في الرسم البياني هنا نستطيع أن نرى أنه بالعودة إلى عام 1980 فنستطيع أن نرى اللون الأزرق وهي الخسائر الاقتصادية الناجمة عن الكوارث الطبيعية وهي
And in the red is the portion that's insured. And you can see there's a very large gap between the total losses and the insured losses. Here on the right is a graphic from the Geneva Association about understanding and addressing these protection gaps. And it lays out in different markets, insurance markets, what role insurers, governments, and public-private partnerships can play in addressing this gap. And we're going to run through a few of these, or cover a few of these, but right at the top here for insurers is technology and product innovation. And we're going to cover both of these here, especially technology in as much as the catastrophe risk modeling that will be required, but also product innovation. And my friend and colleague Anne-Marie from AXA Climate will talk more about product innovation, and particularly parametric insurance. But I will also talk on the role that governments play and public-private partnerships, which I've been very much associated with. So why is natural catastrophe risk important? There's been quite an interesting evolution, and I'm using the World Economic Forum Global Risk Survey, which goes on every year, has been going on every year for about 20 years, and ranks the severity and likelihood of different types of risks to the global economy. Back in 2010, most of the risks were economic. So these blue squares were in the economic sector. And environmental risks, these light green ones, tended to be lower likelihood and lower severity. However, if we look at the most recent global risks survey, you can see that the green, the environmental risks have moved up to this top right corner. So higher likelihood and higher impact or severity. Indeed, the top risks by likelihood and the top risks by impact, 4 of the top 6 in both categories are environmental risks. So environmental risks, and particularly climate disasters, have grown in importance to the global economy, and their impacts are becoming even more important as climate change starts to take hold. So what role can natural catastrophe modeling play in NatCat risk transfer? I would argue that natural catastrophe risk modeling has been the key driver, not necessarily of reducing insurance costs, but certainly of stabilizing them at a global level. And this is Guy Carpenter's Global Property Cat Rate Online Index, starting in 1990 and through to last year. And you can see that early volatility in the early 90s and going through all the 2000s has stabilized. And it's currently relatively low. It is increasing somewhat. But this cyclicity of pricing of natural catastrophe risk globally has dampened. Volatility has lowered, and we're in a much more stable regime. And that is largely because we understand global natural catastrophe risk because of natural catastrophe models, and we can therefore price it at a global level much more accurately, and we don't have to respond to big natural disasters around the world by increasing prices the following few years. So the response mechanism of natural catastrophe insurance globally is not necessarily to claims. It's already pricing accurately because of these models. But to get there, there is a barrier to entry. data and access to those models and understanding of those models is really important. Here on the right, I've got a plot, a diagram which was actually put together for natural catastrophe risk pools, which I've been very closely associated with, and which have been developed across multiple countries, in the Caribbean, in the Pacific, and in Africa as well. And it shows you what the makeup of the costs of risk transfer are. At the bottom here, we have the expected loss. We have the operating costs. We have the cost of capital, so holding reserves to be able to pay claims, big claims. And then we have the cost of information. And the cost of information is, I think, really important and something that's missing. By this, we mean catastrophe risk modeling and the data that goes into to inform that modeling. And the better the data and the more up-to-date the modeling, the lower this cost of information can be, and the more accessible the global Nat Cat markets are, and the better the pricing that you will get from those Nat Cat markets. So having input data that you can model, and then doing that modeling, whether it's by an insurance company, by the broker, or by a reinsurer, is really a critical part of the natural catastrophe risk transfer landscape. And if you don't have that, you will increasingly find it more difficult to access competitive pricing across a large number of markets. So natural catastrophe risk modeling also plays a broader role in what we call disaster risk financing. Disaster risk financing includes insurance, but isn't only insurance. And we especially refer to disaster risk financing when we're talking about governments and emerging economies where insurance may not have very high penetration. And in those circumstances, we often see that government needs to be, the public sector needs to be a key driver of closing this protection gap, of helping the insurance business and helping insurance mechanisms to take on more risk. And I think it's very important here to bear in mind that the special feature of natural catastrophe risk is that it's affecting a lot of people in the same area at the same time. And conventional insurance structures, particularly in small countries where single insurers or the insurance market of a country could get, all the insurers could get affected by the same event to a very significant degree, that they need to access global risk reinsurance markets to manage that risk. And the same goes for governments. And so we need to think about risk transfer and insurance in a broader sense than at the individual level or at the corporate level, and think about how insurance can help governments to manage natural disasters and be able to respond to them effectively. And what modeling brings are a few things, but especially risk identification. So understanding what your risks are, your natural catastrophe risks are, is really important to underpin a risk management strategy. It can direct you towards where risk reduction is a good investment, so building a seawall or flood control measures.
Simon, if you can
where those are creating the most risk, and so where investment in reducing that risk is going to be the most powerful and effective. It could also help with preparedness. If you know what the possibilities are of what events could happen and what their consequences could be, then you can prepare.
Mr. Simon, if you can close your translation, please.
Underpin financial protection through insurance and other mechanisms. And all of that can build to a more resilient recovery. And resilient recovery, having the money to recover from a Nat Cat event is absolutely critical to be able to continue economic and social development. Whether you're a government trying to look after the people of your country, or whether you're a business trying to get back on your feet and start doing business again, or whether you're an individual who needs to have some funds to repair their home or to spend on replacing stuff that's broken. So the core pieces of what insurance does for us as individuals, as businesses, and as society and government is the same. And we need to understand what the needs will be for natural disasters to be able to plan and implement effective.
Mr. Simon, please close your translation. Mr.
I'm going to highlight a couple of particular features here of which insurance I think speaks to and is important for the development of insurance opportunities and closing this protection gap. One is the ability to deliver effective resources quickly, but particularly at the right time. The plot here shows the kind of cyclicity of resource requirements. This is from a public sector perspective, but businesses are not particularly different in this case.
Mr. Simon, can you please close your translation? Mr. Simon, we don't hear you, Mr. Simon. سكتت له الميكرو تاعو ليش سكتت الميكرو؟
And such things. Then there's a middle phase of recovery, which is using the resources of the country that are immediately close by to get the country or the business back on its feet. And then you have reconstruction, which is longer term investment to rebuild your infrastructure, to rebuild buildings, physical assets, etc. And that tends to be the most money that you need. But what we found is that the more amount of money that is available early for relief and to get recovery off to a good start, the lower the amount of money and the quicker this reconstruction phase. So we can shorten and reduce the cost of reconstruction if we do relief and recovery well. And so if insurance can put money into the system very quickly, it can be spent very effectively to reduce future costs. And in one example that I'll speak about in a second, we found that $1 spent early in a disaster, so in this phase, can save $5 in future recovery costs.
Mr. Simon, if you can close your...
The other piece I want to just touch on, which is, I think, of interest to the region in particular, and to emerging economies or data-poor environments generally, is the role of technology and particularly of satellite information. Satellite data has grown in its availability, in its resolution. So how good the quality of the data is. And this is particularly important for climate and weather data and for data that's important for insurance purposes. And we can use this data either directly, and Anne-Marie will talk more about parametric insurance, where we use satellite data directly. But also data can be used as inputs into catastrophe risk models. And many catastrophe risk models use satellite-based data to fill in gaps if data isn't available on the ground. We see the technological advance of satellites now, which are not just being launched by big developed economies. Emerging economies are putting satellites into space, and also private companies are putting many small satellites into space, which are particularly designed to deliver information that's relevant for insurance. So I talked a little bit about input to hazard modeling. So as raw data into modeling, but also to help to calibrate models. We can, and that goes for hazards, themselves. For exposure, we can capture inventories, building footprints from space. So we, at a very high resolution now, we can image actual buildings, roofs, even the type of structures in some cases, and also the vulnerability. What the overall resilience of a particular area is, and also geopolitical and population dynamics. And afterwards, we can use satellite information, which is available in real time on the whole. So the data is getting beamed down from space back to the Earth and being processed on the fly all the time. So we can get these shock responsive triggers through parametric insurance. We can also monitor slow onset disasters like droughts, biomass, locust swarms. We can monitor those from space. And also it can help with claims and loss adjustment. We can see very, very quickly over a wide area where the main damage is going on, so we can direct loss adjustment resources in particular, and also kind of response mechanisms to go to the places where the most damage has been done and where recovery is most needed. For the final couple of slides, I'm just going to dive in a little bit more to an actual catastrophe risk model, which is operating in Africa for drought. But it's a platform called Africa Risk View, which was developed by the African Risk Capacity, which many of you will be aware of, which is a risk pool for African Union member countries, started covering drought risk, which is what I'll talk about here, but it's also recently expanded to tropical cyclone risk, and also is expanding to flood risk as well. And the Africa Risk View is an interesting platform because it serves three separate purposes. It underpins building out of risk understanding in these countries. So it develops a risk profile, which the countries have had a lot of capacity building to do themselves, to help to adjust the model to the local circumstances in different parts of a given country. So it's very much a modeling platform. It's not a locked model. It's a platform where you can interact with it and adjust it so that it meets your needs and reflects the data that you have in your own country. The second thing it does is it underpins parametric insurance, so risk transfer through parametric insurance. The third thing it does is it enables real-time monitoring of the drought and food security situation in a given country. So it gives you real-time information which otherwise wouldn't be available at a national level or is very difficult to collect in real time. There are very good drought monitoring systems, particularly in Northwest Africa. But this allows you to have a kind of a national view of where rainfall is lacking, where crops aren't growing as they should, and give you very good early warning of potential drought. So the model comprises different layers. The main input is rainfall, and this is rainfall from satellite data collected, compiled every 10 days into decades of rainfall. That then gets processed into a drought index. And up here, this is the way that the drought index is constructed. And it equates the amount of rainfall and the amount of water in the soil that a crop is actually there against what a crop needs to grow properly. And so if there's a deficit of water, then that's bad for the crop. If there's a surfeit, if there's more water than you need, then that's generally good, except if it's too much more water, then it can be bad as well. And so as the growing season goes on, this is constantly monitored, and you can understand where a crop is in its growth cycle relative to, thanks to the rainfall that's going in, relative to where it should be under a normal ideal growing circumstances. We then superimpose this on vulnerability. So where populations will be at risk if crops aren't growing, and to how much at risk they're going to be. So are they very high risk? Are they medium risk? Are they low risk? And then we benchmark the drought index against what is normal in those particular, or what has been normal for the past 5 to 10 years. And so we kind of rank the drought, or
Mr.
the potential
Simon,
drought, as being
1 minute, please.
relative to
Mr. Simon.
what the population might expect to get from their crops, given their recent experience. And this helps to calibrate the expectation, and therefore what the impact of a particular drought will be. And then what we do is we take
Mr. Simon, 1 minute, please.
that modeled impact, and we turn that into a response cost. So this is the additional funding that a government will need in this case to respond to a given drought. And that is ultimately what we're insuring against in the African risk capacity. We're trying to get money to the government very quickly to be able to respond to a to a failed crop or a lower than expected crop yield, so that actually they're out in front of a food security situation. Droughts happen, crops fail, and then it takes that there are usually many months worth of supplies and other mechanisms that can be used to cope with that food insecurity. And so if we actually fill that gap, or use that to put in place mechanisms to respond, then when actual food insecurity occurs, that the response will be there to help the populations to recover. So this is a very actually a relatively simple but very open platform for risk modeling, and is serving a particular purpose from the insurance perspective, but it's also serving a broader purpose of informing governments on their risk profile and also on the ongoing situation.
Mr. Simon, if you can please.
So this risk information and early warning
element
is something I want to actually, this is my final slide I want to leave you with. Catastrophe risk models were developed to underpin insurance, but their broader use is really, really important to emphasize. These two plots here, this is a risk profile going back to the late 90s for a particular country and its population that likely to be affected, or was affected, sorry, from historical droughts. This is generated from the Africa Risk View drought model. So you can see that 2001, 2002 was a very bad year. Over 2 million people were affected. Quite a few years were perfectly fine in here. And this is actually the current year. And the orange lower part of this is where so this is in the middle of this year, 2010, 2011. This is where we expect the number of people affected by drought to be. But this is the range of potential outcomes. And this is the real-time kind of monitoring and early warning element, which is shown also here on the right. The red dots plot the progression of the growing season in this particular country and for this particular crop. This is the current situation at the beginning of 2011. And these give you all the potential end scenarios depending on how much or how little rainfall there is between the current time and the end of the growing season. And so in most cases, the the growing season will turn out okay, and the response costs, which we're plotting here, will be within a fairly limited range around what the expected was, which is the blue line here. However, there is a scenario, if it stops raining, for example, where these response costs could go very, very high. And so even 4 months before the end of the growing season, we have a good idea of what the potential outcomes could be. This is really useful information for planning for food insecurity. I've also up here put a plot of the tropical cyclone model. So Africa Risk View is a modeling platform, has different perils within that platform. The architecture of the platform is such that it can do the same things for different perils. And in this case, for cyclone, the early warning component is not as, we don't have as long a lead time, but we still get 3 to 5 days of forecast for tropical cyclones. So we can use that information through the catastrophe model to model what the potential impacts of the cyclone are going to be, as well as once the cyclone has passed, what the impacts actually were. And so very similar things can be done with tropical cyclones as well. And the main purpose is to use these models in this case to understand the risk, to trigger parametric insurance in this case, which Amaury is going to talk about, and then also to provide ongoing early warning. I'm going to leave it there and hand it back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simon. Can you please just close your translation? Because we had 2 voices over the same channel. Your voice in English and the translation. And please, because I think you have exceeded your time, I will ask Amaury to stick to the time. From your presentation, I have 2 remarks or 2 questions. You will answer them later. The first question concerning, the cost. Is it too prohibitive and could make modeling impossible for some countries? And I think the ARC is a collective African initiative. Maybe in the Arab world, we can imagine something similar. Because today, we have an initiative in Morocco, we have an initiative in Tunisia supported by the World Bank, etc. But we have countries like, for example, Yemen or Mauritania, who are really, underdeveloped. And maybe if we are pooling resources, maybe we can reach something. I will come back to you later on this. And now I I will ask Amaury to do his presentation. I'm sorry, but I will ask you not to stick your time. And please keep paying attention to my, to me, because I might stop you after 10 minutes, if you don't mind, Amaury. Amaury, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Just a first question. Do you see my screen, my presentation?
Not yet. We don't see your presentation yet. You have to use the share screen.
Share screen.
In the bottom of your Zoom.
Okay. So, okay.
It's green.
No problem. So I need to, because I have 2 screens and one is working, the other is not working. So I need to change the screen and I will be able to do it. Sorry for that.
No worries. We'll wait for you. Just, to tell you that still now we have 285 attendees, which is a very good number, especially as I told you, today is the National Day in UAE, and it's Thursday, which is the last day of the week in many countries, many Arab countries. We are still waiting, for Amaury, Mr. Amaury, to. No, not yet. No, not yet. No, we don't see yet your presentation.
I share my screen, but
I will ask, the technical team, to allow Amaury to share his presentation.
I think I can, but
unless if you want me to share your presentation. Do you want me to share your presentation?
But I think, okay, anyway.
I can do it from my side, Amori, if you want. Huh? I will try.
Do you see something?
Not yet.
Okay. 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 So I will start and I will send it to you if you're fine, because otherwise it will not work.
I think I have your presentation.
No, I don't. No, I don't think so.
Oh, no, I don't have your presentation. If you send it to me, I can share it with the people. You can start your presentation. You can start now explaining. I don't know if you can do it without.
Okay. Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. Before starting, I would like to thank Mr. Abu Zaid and the General Arab Insurance Federation to organize such a webinar on natural catastrophes models. It's very important, and we have seen. I mean, we have seen on the news with the last IPCC report that these natural catastrophes are more and more important in the fact that it impacts our economies more and more, and not only in terms of amplitude, but also in terms of frequency. So, and sorry, because I'm doing two things at the same time because I'm writing. So I will present you not only what is our view on natural catastrophes modeling, but also what are the solutions that can be done by the insurance market. So that's what I will present. So what is happening today? Today we have extreme weather. So sorry for that because I'm. Okay, just sorry, because I have a lot of.
Don't have internet for.
Okay. I tried to send it to you, but it's not working, so I will just. Okay.
If you can continue.
Yes, sorry.
نعتذر على هذا التأخير البسيط، ولكن هذا بتعرف هذه ظروف الويبينار، معناتها انه مش الامور دائما بتمشي حسب ما بنحب.
Yes. So I'm sending to you. So yes. So all the businesses are impacted by these natural catastrophes. They are, in average, 300 billion in average every year, 300 billion of economic losses that are caused by natural catastrophes overall. And so I send it to you now.
Still waiting for
yes.
To receive it. Still waiting. I did not receive it yet.
Yes.
صار بنعتذر للإخوان والأخوات، بس إن شاء الله إحنا في انتظار إنه توصلنا البرزنتيشن وبنقدمها.
That's a catastrophe. Anyway, so it's the first time something happens like that. Sorry for me because my presentation has even disappeared, but for me. But, so what we see is an increase of frequencies in the natural catastrophes and an increase of the amplitude. What is important to understand is that here in AXA, but also in other insurance companies, more and more we will need to we will need to be able to use more and more the natural catastrophes models. Why? Because, I mean, the usual way of doing insurance and doing the pricing and assessing the risk in the insurance world is to do statistics.
Amaury, I received an email from you, but not the presentation. It's not attached.
Okay.
If you can send it again, please.
Yeah.
We can give you 2 minutes, you know. Take 2 minutes. In the meantime, you know, I might start by asking, you know, Shams. Just, you know, take your time. I will start by asking Shams some question. Shams, welcome again. And
Thank
my
you.
question
Thank
to
you,
you,
Shakib.
what systemic risks are you most concerned for the MENA region? ما هي الأخطار الكبيرة اللي أنتم بتخافوا منها في منطقة المينا؟ تفضل شمس.
Thank you very much, Shakib. I hope everyone can hear me. And just to repeat your question, so your question is what systemic risks am I or are we the most concerned about for the MENA region?
Yes, please.
So here, I believe what's important first is, of course, to define what systemic risk is. And I think now it's the role, of course, of the different governments and of the regulators to define systemic risk. But let's say that maybe for the purpose of this question, that systemic risk is basically moving from a stable the movement from a stable positive equilibrium to another stable negative equilibrium. And I think here what is important is how this risk may become more and more connected and interlinked, and how they create really instability in the region. So maybe before talking about the NatCat related risk, maybe we can talk a little bit about the broader systemic risk, like terrorism, for example, like cyber, and we have seen a considerable number of attacks before the pandemic, and surely more attacks during the pandemic, and probably more after the pandemic. We can also mention the consequences of the pandemic in countries where we have seen uprisings and riots due in shortage, food shortage, and we can imagine actually combining this with an important NatCat event that could impact, of course, the supply chain, and can just exacerbate the situation and generate more unrest. But we can also imagine a major NatCat event that cannot be handled, for example, by the insurance industry, and where the government has to step in. Of course, this would probably have an impact on the economy of the country, and more pressure on the economy and on inflation in general. And I think maybe to conclude on this question, what is important here is really how to address these systemic risks. And of course, I believe that governments have to prepare for them in general. Maybe I can mention the example of the UK, where there is an advisory group that has been set up basically to advise the UK government on the systemic risks like terrorism, like climate change, like cyber, etc. I think it's very important to have a proactive engagement between the government and the industry in general, and look at how we can basically manage these risks, and how we can become resilient. And then all these things, I guess, have an impact, and it's a question on how much they are interlinked and could become a lot worse. So maybe we could compare also to regions where, for example, you have a high penetration rate, or in other countries where, for example, a good pool setup as a way to mitigate the risk has been created, as long as it makes I guess the country more resilient, of course, because it's not only about transferring the risks. Thank you.
before jumping to the next question, is Amaury ready for the presentation or not yet? Apparently.
One more minute, please.
1 minute. I will ask one more question to Shams.
Sure.
You know, for cyclone risk. But my next question is, has there been any progress in the MENA region when it comes to controlling the flood risk? I think, you know, many countries are concerned. And in 2021, we had floods in Tunisia, in Morocco, in Algeria, in Syria, in Yemen, in Sudan. Has there been any progress in the MENA region when it comes to controlling the flood risk? سؤالي بالعربي، هل هناك تقدم ملموس فيما يخص مراقبة والاستعداد لمخاطر الفيضانات في منطقة الشرق الأوسط وشمال إفريقيا؟ سؤال موجه للأستاذ شمس كسالي.
شكرا شكيب. Maybe here I can talk a little bit about from experience, and maybe to first answer the question directly, I would say that yes, there has been some progress indeed, and again I will give examples. Of course, I cannot talk about the whole region, but maybe focus on one or two examples, and also, of course, there is still to be done, of course, in the region. But I can mention, of course, Saudi Arabia and Jeddah in particular, and maybe I can also talk about Morocco. And I know a little bit about them because I have been involved in placement of some CAT programs from these territories. And in Jeddah, actually, from memory, I believe that more than $3 billion have been invested in drainage and sanitation networks, and that was following the 2009 floods, where from memory I think more than 100 people died. Allah yarhamhum. And there were different projects following the Jeddah floods in 2009. Flood management that included tanks, storage tanks located across the city. There were also mobile as well as permanent water pumps. There were dams, temporary and permanent, and new pipelines and cleanup of the existing drains. And the other example I can mention is Morocco. Maybe also Najm can tell us a little bit more. But Morocco has different plans to mitigate the effect of the climate change in general, and flood, of course, in particular, and invest a lot in protections against the flood, which is, of course, a major peril in Morocco. There are protection plans for cities like Casablanca, like Tangier, against Wadi floodings, Wadi, which are the equivalent in our region to rivers. And one of the solutions, if I'm not mistaken, that they have opted for was extending actually river in underground tunnel through the city with a capacity equivalent to 100-year return period flood, and at a depth of in excess of 10 meters over 5 kilometers. I think these are the two examples I can mention from experience working on some of the CAT programs in these two territories. But for sure, I believe there are also other territories which are, of course, having plans to mitigate the flood risks, especially that we have seen in the last decade an increased number of floods in the region. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Now I will give the floor to Amaury. I received his presentation and I will try to share it with you. I hope we will not have a problem. Okay. Do you see my presentation now?
Yes.
Okay, Amaury, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
I'm sorry, you can go directly to slide 3, please. Yeah.
Just give me 1 second. I'm going.
And I'm very sorry for what happened.
No problem. It happens, you know.
I think There is an IT problem for AXA with Zoom. But anyway, so thank you again for organizing this seminar. So what is happening? No business is left untouched by this extreme weather. There are 300 billion, as I said earlier, cost every year. So there are a lot of economic losses. It's the next slide. And what will be important in the coming months and in the coming years is to not only rely on statistical modeling, but rely more and more on physical models. So in insurance companies, we are used to, with the actuarial department, we are used to use the historical statistic to be able to assess the risk, price the risk. And the fact is that with physical events, with physical perils, the past doesn't describe always what will happen in the future. So we need more and more, even scientists, physical scientists, to be hired by insurance companies, or we need more and more to work with academics to be able to understand and to model the natural perils with these physicians, with these scientists. That's why in insurance companies, AXA being one, we hire more and more people from research. We have in our team earthquake experts, scientists on climatology, on meteorology, and things like that, which are working with the actuarial teams to build these models. Because if we have only a statistical view, we will have a lot of problems to embed the climate change in our models, and we will not be able to also take into account all what is all the forecast we can have on meteorology, and also all the intra-annual phenomenon that can happen, like ENSO, what we call El Niño also, or La Niña. This phenomenon have to be taken into account, and they cannot be taken into account in pure actuarial models. So NatCat models are very important. If you can go to slide 5, please. So what, what do we do now? What are the new solutions? The next one, please. What are the new solutions? Based on these natural catastrophes models, we are building new insurance solutions, which are parametric insurance. Next slide, please. And what is parametric? Parametric is a very easy way to insure, and especially for protection gap, like Simon said before, where we, with the client being a corporate or being a government also, or a public body, choose an index. It can be, and we will see different examples, but it can be temperature, it can be earthquake, accelerations, and so on. And based on this index, and this index being measured by an independent data source, we monitor with the client this index, and if it triggers the index, the insurance cover pays almost immediately the amount. So next slide, please. So that's why parametric opens new possibilities, and especially covering countries against protection gap, as Simon said before. Because when you have some countries where the insurance penetration is not very important, you have a very big difference between the economic losses, total economic losses, and the losses paid by the insurers. And that's why to cover this gap, which is a protection gap, it is very difficult with a standard insurance because you will need to set up new insurance contracts and to have a lot of loss adjusters on the field to review all the economic losses, for example, for an earthquake, to assess all the damages for all the buildings. Here with parametric insurance, and especially using, for example, satellite images, like this is what we do in different cases, we can assess that even for a whole region or even for a whole country. And this is the case, for example, for the SEC earthquake cover in Morocco. We can assess the damage almost immediately, the economic losses damage almost immediately, which means that there is no need to build a very complicated covers. There is no need to implement new laws in the countries to oblige people to insure themselves or to oblige business to insure themselves. Parametric covers can open these new possibilities to cover this protection gap. Next slide, please. And the next one. So here are some use cases of the parametric insurance. For example, on cyclone, and we know that in Oman, there was a very large cyclone recently. On cyclone protection for a hotel or even for a country, we can use the path of a cyclone, and we can protect some assets based on what we call cat in the box, meaning some circles. So if you have a hotel or an airport, you put a circle around this hotel or airport, and you can have even two circles, as you can see in the table on the left. And based on the category of the hurricane, we will pay a percentage of the limit. So let's say that with this airport, we know, and we work with the airport, we know that for a category 5 hurricane, there will be, for example, $20 million of losses. So we put the limit at $20 million. And as you can see, if it goes to category 5, we will pay the $20 million, 100% of this limit. And if it's a lower hurricane, we will pay a lower amount, 75%, 50%, 25% of this amount. This is how we do with hurricane, and the hurricane path and the wind speed are measured by the meteorological offices worldwide. So this is public data. Next slide, please. We have also earthquake protection. It's the same principle, but earthquake protection is based on, there are different types of indexes possible, one being the acceleration of the soil. So because the acceleration of the soil is directly linked to the losses based on the vulnerability of the buildings of the different of the buildings that we cover. And if we are able to measure the acceleration of the soil, we are able to assess the losses. And this acceleration of the soil is measured by independent academics, USGS, for all the earthquakes worldwide. So we are able to have this index allowing us to assess very quickly economic losses with earthquake. Next slide, please. We have the same earthquake protection as a cat in the box, which is not based on acceleration of the soil, but which is based on the magnitude of an earthquake and the depth of this epicenter and also the distance from what we protect of this epicenter. And that's the same principle. Next slide, please. We have also flood protection. So flood is a very important peril, and especially linked to climate change. All the scientists and all the science reports say that the floods will increase in terms of frequency and amplitude in the coming years. So that's something that we are protecting using different types of index. And the last technology we use is the satellite images taken by what we call radar signal, and which are signals where the bandwidth can cross the clouds. So the problem with satellite images with floods is that the optical images, they take some pictures of the clouds. So if you want to take some pictures of what are the areas in a country which are flooded, you need some satellites which are able to see through the clouds. And these are radar satellites, what we call radar and SAR signals. And this allows us to see the footprint of the flood, and also based on data terrain modeling, so the models of the countries, the hills and all the roads, we are able to modelize the depth of the flood. And the index we can use are the depth, the footprint, and the length, the duration of the flood, which can have some impacts on the losses, on the economic losses of due to these floods. Next slide, and that's the last one. So I would be happy to answer any question. And again, I'm sorry for this IT and technological problem I had with my computer.
Shakib, I think you are on mute.
Really sorry. Before moving, to the second part of the webinar, I will ask, my colleague, to bear with me. I have three questions, one for Shams, one for Mr. Simon Young, and one for Mr. Amori. I will start by Mr. Simon Young, and I have one question. In fact, two questions. How do you see the impact of climate change? How this will impact the insurance industry? This is my first question. It's more an academic question. And the second question, which is maybe I think it's more difficult, would it be possible to build a model for pandemics, such COVID-19? Mr. Simon.
So the first question, clearly climate change is already having and will continue to have a big impact on the insurance industry, particularly for climate disasters and extreme weather events. I think one of the very interesting aspects of what we've been talking about today of natural catastrophe risk modeling is that these models are going to be the underpinning of understanding how climate change is going to impact society, economies globally. And the Paris Climate Agreement, I viewed that, and many others viewed that, as a recognition, in part anyway, recognition that what we're doing is managing risk. We're managing risk, physical risk from climate events, but we're also managing economic risk from a transition away from fossil fuels. So it's a risk management challenge. It's a global risk management challenge. It is the existential risk management challenge of our time. And the insurance industry has many of the tools that will be required to manage the change that's needed. and to manage that risk. So it's not all about selling more insurance or getting what the price of that insurance will be. It's about understanding those risks in a framework, in a quantitative framework, which is what the insurance industry writ large does on a day-to-day basis. So I think that's perhaps the thing I would emphasize is don't think about climate change in terms of, or certainly only in terms of what it's going to do to your book of business, how you can plan for it in the near future. Of course, we always think of insurance as the next year and the next year after that, rather than longer term. But so we need to adjust that thinking to think longer term. But certainly don't think about it just as how it's going to impact on your current book of business. Think about it in the context of that insurers are very good at understanding risk management more broadly, and what can you bring to the table in discussions at a sovereign level, at the national level, at the international level, as well as with your clients and your other stakeholders. The other side of it, also, of course, on the asset side of the balance sheet for insurers, making sure that your investment portfolio is forward-looking and is aligned with the way that the economy is going to decarbonize. And there's a lot of work, including at my company, but also AXA actually on the investment management side are at the forefront on this as well, along with many others. But there's been some very rapid changes to the way that investment asset managers look at long-term investments and make them more climate friendly, let's say. So that's certainly something else that insurers need to be aware of. To your second question, I talked a little bit about the African risk capacity earlier, and I was the founding CEO of the insurance side of the African risk capacity, and that was launched in 2014 when the West Africa Ebola crisis was emerging. And early in 2015, we got asked by the African Union heads of state to look into whether we could apply similar principles to what we were doing for drought for pandemic risk in Africa, particularly with a focus on Ebola at that time. And so I actually co-created the program that to start looking at whether you could model pandemic risk in Africa in particular, and if you could, then how you could ensure, perhaps help to countries to prepare for and insure against outbreaks. And so that program is actually ongoing, but also I've worked on done work with the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank to look at how we can use the risk models that are available for pandemics now. So you can model them. It's a very there's a lot of art to it. There's a lot of science as well, but there's a lot of art. A lot of it's about human behavior and government action, which is very kind of soft and unpredictable, let's say. But there are models available, and we can use those for risk transfer. But as we've all seen with the COVID pandemic, it's not just affecting one country and one set of insurance companies like the cyclone in Oman did. It's affecting the entire world simultaneously and all elements of the economy, some worse than others for sure. But so it isn't something that we're going to be able to diversify globally. So we have to be careful about how we deploy insurance to help, but it certainly can help. And I think small businesses is an area where we know we can do pandemic insurance. It wouldn't be comprehensive, but non-damage business interruption is something where we've seen small businesses in particular suffer the consequences of not having coverage for that. And I think that that's an area where we can certainly kind of help to fill this protection gap for pandemics in particular.
Sorry, you're again on mute, Shakib.
Sorry, Najm and Amoury. I will not ask the question now. I will postpone them, and I will ask Najm, to do his presentation. If you are on mute, if you can start your presentation, and immediately after your presentation, Khalid has some slides about, the Omani case. Najm, please go ahead. تفضل Najm. Shukran, Najm.
Okay, thank you, Shakib. Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for everybody. I don't know if my presentation.
Yeah, we can see your presentation. Thank you.
Okay. So my topic is about the Moroccan catastrophic event insurance. Okay, sorry. I lost it. Just 1 moment. Okay. Okay, my topics is about Moroccan catastrophic event insurance regime, and we talk about there is a plan for my presentation, and I go very quickly in order to leave my colleague to have his presentation. The covered periods according to Law 110/14 are in two types of periods. We can find natural events such as earthquake, floods, tsunami, and in the other hand, we can find human violent actions such as terrorism, riots, or civil commissions. For the first one, natural event, we have the limit per event is $300 million, and the annual aggregate limit is $900 million. For the man-made, we have the limit per event in the law, $30 million, and the annual aggregate limit $60 million. When the catastrophic event was occurred and the total damage is upper or more than the limit per event, the indemnities due under this cover are reduced according to the global limits, and the terms and conditions of this reduction are fixed by the state. So the catastrophe risks event must be recognized by the government within 3 months of the occurrence date. In this slide, I share with you the cover has 2 types: insurance contracts for the insured who has an insurance contract, and the solidarity fund for catastrophe risks for the physical persons who don't have an insurance contract. We see this kind for solidarity fund after. In this slide, I share with you contracts concerned with the mandatory extension for the catastrophic cover. In the first column, we have the kind of family which concerned by the mandatory extension, and in the second we have the covered person, and in the last one we have the covered properties. For the first family, which concerned by the compulsory extension for catastrophic event guarantee, we can find motor liabilities. What is covered under this kind of contract? The driver, passengers, vehicle owners, and partner and dependent children. And also what is covered under this kind of contract, the insured vehicle. For the second one, motor damage, and what is covered, it is covered the insured vehicle. For the third is bodily injury liabilities, third person who are in the insured side, excluding the employees. What is covered under this kind of contracts, person in the insured side. And the last one is property insurance. What is covered is the building and content covered in the property insurance contract. And we have some exclusions, some contracts who doesn't apply the extension for catastrophic event guarantee. We can find life, for example, aviation, marine, legal protection, and so on. You have in it in the last, at the bottom of the slide. In this slide, I share with you property deductibles and limits applicable to the cover. For the first column, we have property type. We can find industrial, commercial, and as a guarantee limit, we can have, we have 500,000 US dollar, for residential 200,000 US dollar, and for motor vehicle 20,000 US dollars. And these deductibles and limits apply per risk and per event. But for the bodily injuries due to the catastrophe event are indemnified according to the scale stated in 2 October 1984, applicable on motor accidents in Morocco. In this slide, I share with you the process of pricing. A pricing model was developed with the assistance from the World Bank to the Moroccan state to determine the average annual loss and the loss exceedance curve. The insurance sector has been represented in all the process of modeling by myself in about 10 years, I guess, and the results were shared with the insurance sector. The results of this model are in line with those obtained by the CAT Insurance and Reinsurance and the SCR, Société Centrale.
Najm, est-ce que tu peux agrandir, s'il te plaît? Si tu peux appuyer sur diaporama pour agrandir l'image. Ah, il faut agrandir. Très bien.
It's okay.
Parfait, parfait.
And based on this result, we can, on this result of the pricing model, the supervisory authority, ACAPS in Morocco, calculates the rates to be applied to premium for the contracts to which the catastrophic event guarantee is added. The premium is set by the Ministry of Finance on a proposal from ACAPS, supervisory authority, as follows. In this slide, we can talk about the pricing by kind of contracts and broker commissions. For the first family property insurance, we have 8% of the premium relating to this guarantee net of all taxes without exceeding 10,000 US dollar. For the second kind of contract, which concerned by the mandatory extension, we can find motor damage, and the rate is 1.5% of the premium net of all taxes. For motor liability, we have two type of rates, 2% of premium for public transport motors and 3.5% for of the premium for the other motors. And the last kind of contracts which concerned by the mandatory extension, bodily injuries liabilities, and the rate is 2% of the premium. Also, the particularity of our system, the commission rate is 3% of the guarantee premium covering the catastrophe risk net of any taxes, and also is fixed by the law. the commission to give to broker and who sells the contracts or the guarantee event. Here I share with you claims handling process according to law 110/14. We have 6 steps. The first steps, when major natural or man-made event occurrence, the insured has 20 days to make a declaration of loss. And the catastrophe risks event must be recognized by the state or the government within 3 months. And this declaration must include event location, date, and duration. And then after that, victims have 90 days to register. And the 4th step, the insurer has 60 days to notify the claims amount to the insured. And the 5th step, the insured has to accept or decline with 30 days after after reception of the insurer notification. And the last step, the insurer has 21 days to proceed with payment or of the agreed amount. This is a summary of the claims handling process, but we built in a CAT insurance and reinsurance or claims handling process in more details. Now I talk about the Solidarity Fund for Catastrophic Events. Solidarity Fund for Catastrophic Events, his purpose is to indemnify compensation of bodily injuries, maximum 70% of the scale applicable to the victims of traffic accidents, and another indemnity and allocation of the physical person whose principal residence is damaged. And here we can find 2 types of allocation. Allocation to the owner, which cannot be higher than 70% of the value of reconstructions, or an amount fixed by law. And we have now $25,000 US. And we find also an allocation for loss of rent, 6 months rent for the owner and 3 months rent for the occupant free of charge. This indemnity, these allocations will be allocated according to the law with a clearly procedure. And now we can talk about the fund budget for the Solidarity Fund against catastrophic events. We can find state's initial allocation, potentially subsidies and remuneration for provided services. And the most important fund budget is parafiscal tax. Parafiscal tax is as an insured contribution determined by state. 1% is added to amount of insurance premium based on all insurance contracts with the exception of life and works compensation contracts. And the collection of this contribution is provided by the insurance and reinsurance companies. Here in this slide, I want to talk or share with you the role of CAT insurance and reinsurance as an aggregator for the insurance sector. We give a training for all insurance companies on the catastrophe risk event. And also we assist the market for the implementation of the coverage in their information system. And also we give a training and animation of claims network loss adjusters. And also we elaborate a claims management process relating to the catastrophe risks in more details. And now we work with the team in a CAT insurance and reinsurance to build an information system in order to manage all claims for catastrophic events for all insurance sectors, in order to have a centralization of claims to avoid double compensation. And the most important role of CAT as an aggregator for the insurance sector is a collection and processing of the exposure data. And this information and this data is very important for modeling NatCat and for managing catastrophe risks. The insurance companies will have to provide us to cat insurance and reinsurance every year the below information per risk as requested by the cat insurance and reinsurance. When we can find some more important information such as address of the insured site or type of risks such residential, commercial, industrial. And also the insurance companies give us or send us the insurance value for building and the insurance value for content. And as you know, this information is very important for NatCat modeling and also for to build a risk profile in order to purchase the coverage from reinsurance international market. By using this information, the team in cat insurance and reinsurance and using the ArcGIS software, they make mapping on hazard and insured capital. On the left, we can find the mapping for seismic hazard. For Morocco, we have five zones for exposure for seismic hazard, depending on PGI, peak ground acceleration. And in the right, we can map of insured capital coupled with the earthquake hazard, for example, in this example, in the Agadir city. And this information is very important, and this mapping is very important for us in order to have a location of potentially affected contracts in order to better understand the number of expected claims and deploy the loss adjuster and deliver real-time information to stakeholders. The same things is done for flood hazard. And also we can make visualization on insured capital at street level. There are some examples of map produced by team in cat insurance and reinsurance. And
if you can conclude in 1 minute, please.
Yes, just
I'm sorry to put you like this.
Yes, the last slide I share with you the scheme of reinsurance coverage catastrophe risk in Morocco. At the bottom, we can find all insurance companies. We have 11 insurance companies, and the cat insurance and reinsurance sign two kinds of treaties between each insurance companies, quota share and stop loss, in order to protect their retention. The cat insurance and reinsurance make a capacity. The capacity is about $40 million for NatCat and $6 million for man-made. And after this capacity, we go together with SCR, our reinsurance, local reinsurer, to buy a coverage from the international reinsurance markets. And after that, SCR placed 90% of the program and CAT placed 10% of the program. And in this regime, we have a state guarantee for failure of placement or default of international reinsurers. And this guarantee was made by signing a contract between Ministry of Finance, Solidarity Fund for Catastrophe Risks, SCR and CAT on 4th October 2019. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Najm, for your presentation. Before giving the floor, to Khaled, I have to make 1 or 2 remarks. First of all, we are still 267 people attending, this event, which is a good number. Number 2, just, to remind our audience that in 1961, we had a huge earthquake which destroyed completely Agadir city. And one positive conclusion from Najm's presentation, which is a very good presentation, is the role of the government or the role of the state. The state guarantee is really a key for developing NatCat it's a protection. And two, the use of the local reinsurer. I think the Moroccan model in terms of cooperation between the 11 companies and the SCR and the FSEC and the government, it's really a good example for the Arab world. Now I will ask Khaled to intervene now. Of course, Khaled, I will not ask you not to. I will ask you not to be short. And I'm sorry, this is how it works, for this kind of webinars. Please go ahead, Khaled.
Thank you, Shakib. I hope you can see my screen.
If you can, use the panorama, to make to be more visible, please.
Is that clear? No?
It's clear, but you can enlarge the PowerPoint, the slides from the bottom right. Now you have to close the presenter view. Go to 3 points, and you can click on them, and then you can just, close the presenter view, please.
I'm trying to do that.
3 نقاط بتضغط عليهم يبان لك close the presenter view. Just to tell you, we have too many questions, and I apologize, for all our attendees. We cannot answer the question. Honestly speaking, even if we have 3 hours, we cannot answer the question. خالد تقدر توسعها ولا لسه؟ 3 نقط اللي عندك اللي عليهم الكرسور. اضغط عليهم وهو بتعمل لك بريزنتر فيو. لا الكرسور هنا تحت، من تحت على اليسار. شفت وين فين الكرسور؟ لا انزل الكرسور على اليسار تحت من البرزنتيشن بتاعك الكبيره. وين فيه 3 نقط، الدائره فوق منها 3 نقط. الو.
Yes, Shakib. 3 نقاط. Yes. Sorry.
Hide presenter view, please.
Sorry about that. I'm not used to Zoom. I'm more into Teams. Anyway, thank you, Shakib, very much for this opportunity and for selecting the subject. I think from all the previous colleagues' presentation, we all learned about managing NatCat and the risks related to that. I think our...
If you can talk close to your computer, because we want to hear you better.
Okay. So in my short presentation, I will share with you the Omani market experience with NatCat as a peril and the way forward for the Omani market. I will start with some historic data about Oman. As you know, Oman is located in facing the Indian Ocean and the Sea of Oman. And that location with more than 2,000 kilometers of coastal line put it exposed to many tropical cyclones. And I think most of the colleagues in the insurance industry knows about the cyclones hitting Oman. The largest one in recent year was the Bunu in 2007. The economic loss is almost $4 billion with an insured loss of 650 million. And here again, we can see clearly the gap of insurance, gap of cover. There are other cyclones since 2007, and I'm here listing only the major cyclones with the material, economic, and insured losses. But there are much more. In a single year, we can have. The next one is the Fed, and economic loss is around $1 billion with the insured loss of 150 million. Then a few years later, 5 years later, in Muscat, this is not a cyclone, it's basically flash floods affecting Muscat as a capital city. And the economic loss is almost 10 times the insured loss at 26 million. I forgot to mention that the topography of Oman is the coastal line. We have also the mountain right in front of the coastal line. So any cyclones or heavy rains, they are blocked, their progression inland are blocked with the mountains, and that causes a major flooding or flash floods coming from mountains to the coastal line where major cities are. Continuing with the major cyclones, 2018 is Mikulu, another major event affecting this time the southern part of Oman in Salama area. The economic loss evaluated at in excess of $1.5 billion US. The economic loss is around 400 million US dollar. Then in the same year, 2018, there is a less known cyclone, which is Cyclone Luban, which is luckily did not affect major facilities with an economic loss of 2.5 million, and insured loss is not material to mention. And more lately, we had Cyclone Shaheen, 3rd of October 21. It's also another major event. There are no official data yet on the economic losses and insured losses. But in Omarli, we try to communicate with all stakeholders, local stakeholders, and we are estimating the economic loss and the insured loss to be, the economic loss are almost below 2 billion, and the economic loss in the range of 160 to 170 million US dollars. So beside the cyclone, it's less known that Oman is also exposed to the earthquake and the proximity with the fault in the Sea of Oman is affecting Omani territory. Here I'm listing only the earthquake above 5, magnitude 5. And as you can see, yes, there is no major frequency, but the Omani soil is exposed to large earthquake event that can reach 8, magnitude of 8. So all these events was a challenge for the insurance market, I would say. So from insurance sector perspective, the challenges is that there is a quite competitive going on in the market, which is natural and healthy for any insurance market. But probably the challenge here is that competition also on the NatCat element cover that is given with the property engineering, and probably that competition pushed the pricing of NatCat peril or exposure down. Also, there is a high anti-selection in the sense that most of the insured knows that the coastal line are more exposed than inland, deep inland of the subcontinent to cyclones. So the insurance penetration is heavier in the area more exposed to cyclone, which is not a good way for risk mutualization within the Omani soil. The third challenge for the insurance company, local insurance company, is the volatility of their financial results I mean, whenever there are major losses that affect their bottom line, especially in recent years where the retention of the local company is increased, or because of the frequency of the events. And the last challenge faced by the local insurance company, especially after Mekunu in 2018, is, I would say, the reticence of the international insurance market to provide capacity, especially the proportional capacity to the local market. So far, all the local insurance companies managed to maintain their treaty book days, allowing them to work properly. But the risk is there. The international reinsurer express that something needs to be done to manage the NatCat exposure. From a local authority viewpoint, I think the insurance penetration is quite low. And that is a concern for local authorities in the sense that...
Khaled, علي الصوت شوي, please.
Okay.
If you can raise your voice, please.
Okay, I'll come close to the mic. So the insurance penetration is quite low in Oman, and that is a challenge for the local authority in the sense that traditionally or historically, the local authority stepped forward after each event to compensate non-insured people from the budgets of the Sultanate, and that with a low insurance penetration, that caused an increase in social compensation, especially with the development of the city on the coastal line and all that. And at the same time, this caused also volatility impact on the budgeting of the Sultanate from years where the compensation or the subsidy of the government are huge following major loss, and some other years there are no events, and there was no proper system to manage those fundings. From a reinsurance market perspective, I think the major challenge, and my colleague already addressed that point and stressed on the importance of the quality of the data and aggregate data, and as well as the modeling, the importance of NatCat modeling. So from aggregate data quality, I think the Omani market did progress. There are some companies that are interested in their IT system, especially when it comes to large risks. We can see that as we were really working with all the market. But I think there is more work to be done. In terms of NatCat modeling, although there are, I mean, the local insurance market, not necessarily all have proper NatCat modeling that helps the reinsurer to evaluate the exposure and to price properly. The third challenge for international reinsurance market, probably the flood models dedicated to Oman. And I think for Oman, the flooding of the flash floods is challenging to model because of the nature of the topography. It keeps on changing after each event, and especially the good news is that recently, during the recent workshop where we presented, they announced the launch of a dedicated model for Oman flood. That's a good news, and we hope that will help the international reinsurance market to have a better view of the exposure. And I think the local authority as well need to work on that for mapping of the flood risks in Oman. The last challenge for the reinsurance market is the lack of adequate NatCat pricing in the primary market, which make it difficult to chart the right price to exposure when it comes to the reinsurance placement. So the local market is quite aware about Nat Cat challenges. The discussion about Nat Cat pooling is not of today. There were discussions for many years, especially after Bunu in 2007. Probably the awareness is at the highest level after the Mikulu 2018. And at that time, Omar Lee and many insurance companies in the market collectively tried to start or initiate a Nat Cat pool for Oman. But unfortunately, that tentative did not conclude, and there was no.
علي صوتك يا خالد please.
Okay. Sorry.
المترجمة ما بتسمع صوتك please. علي صوتك.
Sorry.
Raise your voice.
I will try it. Okay. So in 2018, there is a tentative to initiate a Nat Cat pool, but unfortunately that did not conclude, especially when the COVID hits in early 2020. The discussion about that plan was stopped in a way. More recently, after the Shaheen loss on the 3rd of October, it was a major reminder for all stakeholders on the impact of the Nat Cat, and I think there is a very important element here. On the 11th of October, His Majesty the Sultan Haytham bin Tariq, the Sultan of Oman, has decreed the establishment of a National Emergency Fund to deal with similar events in the future. And I think this decree shows that all stakeholders now converge on the importance of the Nat Cat pooling and mechanism to manage the Nat Cat pool in Oman and to build resilience at both government side as well as the insurance sector side. So following that, Omar Lee took with the cooperation of Willis Re and in partnership with the Capital Market Authority, we organized a seminar. It was live. Here, COVID in Oman is fine, so we managed to group all the people in one room. There was more than 55 attendees, and these are the decision makers from all the insurance market. The Capital Market Authority was there. The Oman Insurance Association Board was there. And there was a presentation from Willis Re team about the different model around the world. And most importantly, also, there was a frank discussion about challenges and the solution and the way forward. And we can say there are three main decisions that come out from this workshop. The first one that everybody agrees is the importance of building a pooling system. The second important decision is the creation of a steering committee, which is representing all the insurance company as well as the Omar Re to prepare a plan and to present it to the authority for approval as soon as possible. And the third thing is to try to achieve quick wins quickly. So the plan should show immediate concrete plan in a short period of time over phases. So those are the three decisions. So this scheme or proposed scheme for Oman, this is the viewpoint of Omar Re in discussion with the Willis Re team and modeling as well as modeling teams. And But again, the steering committee will be the one to review this proposal and to propose the final scheme to the local authority here. But our proposal is to go first is motor class of business. When we look at Shaheen, we see there are more than 15% of the insured losses are coming from motor class. And the reason is that in Oman, only the motor third party is compulsory. And many of the damaged cars were not insured. So that 15% is only representing 25% of the fleet. So there is a major gap in motor class, major gap of cover in motor class. And everybody agrees that motor-owned damage following NatCat, it's important to include. Yes, Shakib. I cannot hear you, you're on mute, Shakib.
I think if you can conclude now.
Yes, sure. Yeah, 1 minute. Okay. So this will be the idea is to make motor classes compulsory. The second is to pool whatever is already insured under the pooling. And the third element, which is a non-insured risk scheme, and this is involving the government, and it will be more as a parametric cover. And here we can see what we are proposing is to protect the gap through parametric cover, and that was earlier suggested by Amori. The scheme will cover for all those perils and type of assets. To conclude, closing the gap, the protection gap for Oman require private-public partnership. We need to promote awareness and risk mitigation, improve aggregate data quality, and that is quite important. A lot of work needs to be done. Invest in NatCat modeling specific to Oman. Compulsory NatCat insurance. Probably I'm not probably sharing the same view with my colleague, but I think NatCat, compulsory NatCat insurance might be initial stage to ensure anti-selection and better risk sharing, at least for first stage for the pool to build proper reserves. The transparency of the NatCat pool scheme is quite important, and everybody needs to have that assurance. And then also the terms and conditions, that how the assets will be insured. It's important that all insurance players, 19 insurance companies in Oman, should be in agreement with that to avoid any competition pricing or term or condition when it comes to selling insurance policy. Thank you, Shakib. Available to answer any question about the topic.
Thank you, Khaled. We still have 8 minutes. I will try, to ask one question to each speaker. I will start by Shams. My question to Shams: which are the successful international NatCat schemes from your experience as a Willis Tower Watson? Shams, please. You have 1 minute.
Thank you, Shakib. Shakib, may I ask your permission to answer this question in Arabic? I think we have all the presentation have been done in English.
Go ahead in Arabic.
Okay, thank you, Shakib. So the question again in English is the successful schemes, NatCat schemes around the world.
Yes.
So in Arabic the question would be يعني
ما هي التجارب الناجحة؟
في التجارب المخططة الكوارث الطبيعية exactly الناجحة في العالم. هناك العديد من المخططات في العالم في بلدان مختلفة، وكلها يعني لها هياكل مختلفة، وكل مجموعة لها نجاحات ولها تحديات. يعني في السؤال، في طريقة صياغة السؤال ربما قد نفكر على
And I'm thinking about the success of some and the failure of some. However, I would prefer using the word challenges and not failures in general. And I think that all of the different schemes actually in English are success stories, because at a certain point, the public sector and the private sector together, they realize that they need to partner. Sorry, because you عذرا نحتاج إلى أمثلة لأنك تعديت الدقيقة. I'm very sorry that I took over the time. However, I wanted to give some of the examples. I said that all of them are pretty successful because the private sector and the public sector, they have realized together that they need to partner together and to find a solution for the natural catastrophes of the population through their protection, through that scheme in general. And we can say maybe in Algeria, in Morocco.
Okay, just to conclude.
لقد انتهى الوقت لأنهي هذه الكلمة الأستاذ شكيب. In my opinion, the most important thing is that the objective that that person who is insured is 100% protected. That's all what we need. And this is the objective of the scheme at the end. والسؤال الأستاذ سايمون، لديك دقيقة واحدة الأستاذ سايمون عذرا. ما هو مستوى المخاطر للكوارث الطبيعية حول العالم وخصوصا في شمال إفريقيا، وما هي الفئة المستضعفة في مجال التأمين وإعادة التأمين التي يجب علينا أن ننظر إليها؟ الأستاذ سايمون، الميكروفون الخاص بك. هل يمكن إعادة السؤال؟ لقد كنت أستمع إلى الترجمة. ما هي مستويات المخاطر في ال10 سنوات القادمة بالنسبة للكوارث الطبيعية في شمال إفريقيا، وما هي الفئة المستضعفة التي يجب النظر إليها بالنسبة للتأمين وإعادة التأمين؟ أعتقد الفيضانات وهطول الأمطار الشديدة والخطير هذان أو النقطة ستكون إحدى أهم عوامل الخطر، وخصوصا في المناطق النائية أو الريفية. أعتقد أن الفيضانات ستزداد كثيرا في هذه المناطق، فيجب أن نأخذ بعين الاعتبار تغيير المناخ الذي يحدث في هذه المناطق النائية، وخصوصا عندما نقوم بالتخطيط الحضري. وأعتقد أننا لا نأخذ ذلك بعين الاعتبار الآن، وحتى أن نضعه تحت طائلة التأمين يجب أن نأخذه بعين الاعتبار، وأن التخطيط يأخذ تغيير المناخ بعين الاعتبار، لأن التغيير قد بدأ بالفعل. وما سنراه في المستقبل غالبا هو سيكون هناك جهتين. الجهة الأولى ربما هطول الأمطار الشديد أو الجفاف الشديد، وأعتقد أن هذا هو أهم شيء سيحدث. سؤالي التالي، أنا لم أفهم ما تعنيه بما شرحته acceleration of the soil. نحن نطلق عليه على هذا الأمر pitch ground acceleration، وأنا سأشرح هذا الأمر، وهو حركة التربة. هي حركة التربة ربما تحدث، أو حتى حركة الأرض، وهذا يحدث عند حدوث الزلزال. هناك حركة تحدث، والمؤشر الأفضل لتقييم
acceleration of this movement, and we measure the highest acceleration. So the higher the earthquake, the higher the acceleration will be of the ground. So that's why we call peak ground acceleration, and there is a vertical peak ground acceleration and a horizontal peak ground acceleration that can be measured worldwide by USGS. So this is a very interesting way to measure the impact of the earthquake. And to tell you why not using magnitude, because magnitude is the energy of the earthquake, but the energy can have different impacts depending on the soil. Because if you put an earthquake in the water, the peak ground acceleration will not be the same as if you put the same earthquake in a different soil, depending on the type of soil. So that's why peak ground acceleration is better to than the standard magnitude, because there are other magnitudes, but the standard.
Merci Amaury. C'est le mouvement des sols en fait en français.
En français, c'est le mouvement des sols, c'est l'accélération du mouvement des sols.
حركة الأرض وحركة التربة إلى آخره. سؤالي لنجم، سؤال أخير، عندك دقيقة إذا يمكن تجاوبني نجم وبعتذر عن الوقت. As the premium and the fund provided by the government, are the premium and the fund provided by the government sufficient to buy reinsurance for both systems? I'm talking about both systems. Don't you think that it is time to use insurance-linked securities, ILS? On the long run, I think you will move, or you will have to move to alternative risk transfer. What do you think about it? In 1 minute.
Yes, for now, the price and the rate was fixed by the Ministry of Finance is sufficient until now, and we can buy the coverage for reinsurance international markets because we have a system. The penetration is very high, high level of penetration. Until now, the price is sufficient, and we have some studies with the World Bank, and we assess the pricing and the good rate. Now for the ELS, insure for the alternative risks like cat bond, we can think perhaps another day for this purpose, for this coverage. But until now, we have the traditional reinsurance way, and we have good with the assistance of all Londonian brokers.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, Khaled. Next question to Khaled. It's concerning Oman. سؤالي هو ما هي الخطوات القادمة التي ستتخذها عمان؟ لأنه أنا لاحظت وأنا مسرور على أنه السلطنة في قرار تأسيس ناشونال ايمرجنسي فاند. إذا فهمنا الناشونال ايمرجنسي فاند هو بس لمساعدة المتضررين، أم هو كفند مثل الفند المغربي أو الصندوق المغربي للمساعدة على شراء تغطيات تأمينية أو البدء في إنشاء فند يمكن أن يغطي الكوارث الطبيعية. Just I can again repeat in English. I noticed that in Oman now they have the National Emergency Fund. My question is it only for the relief, or is it also to buy reinsurance or to buy cover to protect the country and to start something similar to Morocco? Khaled, in 1 minute, please.
Thank you. Sure, Shakib. The plan to work for Oman, and that was discussed, and in principle, the steering committee is discussing this plan proposed by Omar Reed, is to start with the quick wins motor class insured risk peril pooling system, placing on the international market through conventional risk transfer. Now coming to the fund decreed recently, now the government is working on the financial resources, and Omar Reed with the Capital Market Authority, we are trying to, under the authority, the fund will be under the responsibility of Ministry of Finance. So Omar Reed, in the cooperation with the Capital Market Authority, we are trying to promote the idea of the parametric cover and to share the possibility that the insurance and reinsurance risk transfer mechanism can help the fund to manage the resources for more efficiency and better insurance penetration and better resilience for the Omani economy in general. So to answer your question directly, the fund is created. It's the budget or the amount of money is not yet determined, but we are working with our insurance authority to promote parametric cover to the government.
Thank you, Khaled. قبل اختتام هذه الندوة أود أن أشكر كل المتحدثين كل واحد باسمه، مستر سايمون يونغ، مستر أموري دفتال، مستر كسالي، شمس الدين، مستر نجم الحلا وخالد النويري. كما أود أن أشكر كذلك كل زملائي في الأمانة العامة اللي بدونهم لا يمكن أن ننظم أي شيء. وأريد أن أشكر ماركيد اللي هم اللي ساعدونا على أن نكون في المستوى على المستوى التقني. قبل الختام أود أن أقول أننا سنرسل لكم استبيان بعد انتهاء الندوة، سيرفي، ونطلب منكم أنه إملاءه وإرساله للاتحاد، كما سنتم إرسال البرزنتيشن حسب الطلب اللي بيطلبون منا الطلب. وكمان نود إعلامكم أنه الاتحاد العام العربي للتأمين سينظم ندوة عن الطب في آخر شهر 1 يظهر لي يوم 30 إذا ما خانت الذاكرة. وكما سنشارك في مؤتمر العقبة في شهر ماي، وسيكون مؤتمر الاتحاد العام العربي للتأمين من يوم 5 إلى يوم 8 من شهر 6 يونيو حزيران 2022. كما أود أن أشكر كل الحاضرين. احنا منذ البدايه كنا 270 او اكثر شويه 270، في النهايه احنا 223، وهذا دليل على انه في العالم او الناس بتتبعنا وبتهتم بالمواضيع هذه رغم صعوبتها. مره اخرى شكرا لكم. تابعونا على النشره، تابعونا على لينكدين وعلى الفيسبوك بالنسبه للاخوان الذين لا يستعملون اللينكدين، وبالخصوص الاخوان اللي ما بيقراوا باللغه الانجليزيه. ومره اخرى شكرا للجميع، وان شاء الله وشكرا ويليس تاور واتسون، لان ويليس تاور هو الراعي الرسمي لهذه الندوه. وصراحه لولا شمس اللي هو اقترح الندوه، هو اقترح سبورت، ما كنا نقدمها. Thank you all. Thank you Mr. Simon, Mr. Amori, Khaled, Najm and Shams for all your effort, and hope to see you soon because we have a lot of things to do. And sorry for not answering all the questions. أنا بعتذر أنه عندنا عشرات من الأسئلة ويجيونا من زملاء وبيتصور أنه بس سؤالهم هو الأساسي، ما فينا نجاوب على جميع الأسئلة. أنا بعتذر منهم، وإذا سألونا مباشرة بنحاول نرد عليهم. وشكرا لكم، وكل يوم وأنتم بخير، كل عام وأنتم بخير، وإن شاء الله نلتقي معكم في 2022 في ندوات أخرى. مع السلامة.
Thank you. شكرا جزيلا. شكرا شكيب. مع السلامة.
Thank you very much. All the best. Thank you, Simon and Amori.